Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Antónia Fialho, professor in the History Department at University of Évora, coordinator of Group 2 Heritage, Literacies and Intercultural Understanding in our Research Center, CIDEUS, and in the coordination of BDIAS project since the beginning of 2021. This webinar it's an output of BDIAS project, capturing mechanisms and presentation of intangible heritage with emphasis in new media use. It's a two-year project under the FCT Agreement of Scientific and Technological Cooperation Portugal and Slovakia that began in 2019 and whose duration has been formally extended till the end of 2021. The missions and meetings carried out during the first year of the project, especially with Professor Filipe de Mudo Barata, were essential for defining the specific goals of the project and the concrete outputs to be jointly produced. Thus, we underline the following results till this moment. One, individual and joint preparation, production and publication of articles in scientific journals. Two, joint preparation of an e-book that we are finishing now with contents related to the themes and topics covered in the project, such as state of art in traditional knowledge and ECH studies, conventions and legislation, knowledge management and traditional know-how, transmission of traditional know-how, some case studies, analysis of the impact of new media on the transfer of traditional know-how and measurement of the impact on the younger generations and, as the project says, especially urban younger generations. Storytelling and ECH, especially digital supports, museums, fab labs and creative tourism, and the transmission of traditional knowledge, and some comparative case studies in multidisciplinary issues. And third, the present event developed in partnership between the UNESCO Chair in Intangible Heritage of the University of Évora and the Faculty of Social and Economic Sciences at Comenius University in Bratislava. The webinar aims to reflect on the applicability of the UNESCO Convention for the safeguarding of the intangible cultural heritage. So, through different oral interventions, the problems arising from the application of the Convention will be discussed, seeking to rethink the need to improve it. Consideration will be given, in particular, to issues arising from the role of communities in the safeguarding ECH and traditional know-how. Now, and in this moment, I think we must pass, and I ask to our colleague Eva and our colleagues Eva and Ana Carvalho to continue this session for moderation and the presentation of the speakers. Thank you, everybody, and welcome again. Please, Anna and Eva. Now it's after you.
Eva, you may continue, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I would like to introduce our Slovak speakers today. The first one is the principal researcher of our common Slovak-Portuguese project, Professor Milan Konvitt. A few sentences about him. Professor Konvitt has his PhD degree in telecommunication, specialization data communication. 11 years was the head of Department of Mediamatics and Cultural Heritage. He was a senior expert of the International Communication Union and in the field of human resources development, and he was a coordinator of many, many projects, and I can mention, for example, one of them, Project Memory of Slovakia. His research interests are media and communication, and of course, cultural heritage presentation. And Milan's today contribution to our webinar is about intangible cultural heritage context. So Milan, please.
Thank you, Eva, for intangible lore. I'm going to speak on the intangible cultural heritage context. I am not expert in safeguarding cultural heritage, but I know a little bit about the ways of presentation and how to capture cultural heritage. So I decided to speak on context, and I will show you a presentation. You give me just a second. I have to share the screen. Okay. Here we are. Let me start with some statements. The first one is from Theory of Communication, and it says that without context, there is no communication. It is very well known, and it is repeated in many sources. And based on this, I prepared my own statement. Without context, there is no understanding or there is no safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage. So what I am going to present here is that rethinking the concept of intangible cultural heritage should start from thinking about its context and the changes of the context. It is easy to say, it's more difficult to carry it out, because first of all, we have to agree on what does it mean context, and then what parts of context are relevant, and on the contrary, what parts we can eliminate. So if we look for the definition, there are many. Okay? I do not advise you to use Google or any search engine and look for definitions of context, because there are so many that it's impossible to read all of them. So I have chosen just two from Cambridge Dictionary. Cambridge Dictionary says that it's the situation within which something exists or happens, and that can help explain that situation. So the keywords there are the situation and the explanation. The problem is that we don't know from where to where the situation should be taken or should be observed. And we don't know to whom we are going to explain, for example, our cultural heritage. The second definition is that it is interrelated conditions in which something exists or occurs, and the keyword there is an environment. So I will keep this one, the environment, and I am going to elaborate some theory about environment of cultural heritage. So first, I tried to combine those previous definitions in the one that could reflect the ICH context. And I suggest the following definition. It's a multidimensional dynamic environment and its interrelated conditions in which intangible cultural heritage existed or exist. If we look inside this definition, we can find there several parts or several different constitutional parts. The first one is tangible environment. That means environment as such that can be observed, for example, by our eyes, or we can hear something from the environment and so on. Then there is what I call intangible culture. Culture is more perceived than seen from our eyes or ear or something like that. And then there are semi-tangible living conditions. It says that our living conditions are partly tangible, partly intangible. And then there is an evil, and the evil is called technology. And this is what, in my opinion, make us to think about a new definition of intangible cultural heritage, because technology changes not only our lives but also our environment, and in this context also intangible cultural heritage. If we look for some metaphors, what does is context, I propose two. The first one is, I called it container metaphor. And the idea is that any object of intangible cultural heritage is located inside something we call container. And the point is that both of them, that means content and context, in some way in interaction and influence each other. The result is that container is changing because the changing is intangible cultural heritage, and vice versa, intangible cultural heritage is changing because changes in environment that is in context. The second one points out to the facilities of context, and it is the rope metaphor, and it says that the rope is made from strands, and it is necessary to keep all strands in a place in order to have a strong rope. Otherwise, it can be broken up. Transferred in the field of intangible cultural heritage, it says that context come into being through the combination and interaction of different parts of the context. In the other words, if we have a context, it consists of several parts, and it is important to consider all of them to have a clear picture. If we look for other characteristics of intangible cultural heritage, the first one is that without the context, the heritage itself cannot be adequately understood. We can perceive it, we can, for example, hear something or see something, but we are not able to understand it, at least in a complete way. The second statement is about the neutrality of context, and it says that the context itself is not neutral. or it influences the properties of object that is nested in this context. From it then followed that context is not something what doesn't have any end, or it is not an indefinite background. It is in some way ordered and in some way organized, and this way it gives meaning. Otherwise, it's just a mess. Then it depends on the type of the object, what properties of context are more important, what are more relevant, and vice versa, what are not so relevant or what are irrelevant. And the last statement says that it is something like a tennis game. The goal is one time in one part of the playground, and the other time is on the other part of the playground. It means that both of them are in something what we can call interactivity. What are constitutive parts of the context? I put on the first place the location, where the object of intangible cultural heritage is nested or situated. Sometimes we call about genius loci. It means each place has its own spirit, and this kind of spirit directly influences intangible cultural heritage object. Then the second constitutive part is a historical period, to what period of time this particular object belongs. It's maybe 10-year period or 15-year period or one generation, one human generation, or something similar. Then there is social relationship. It can be horizontal between people on the same level, and vertical from the bottom to the top. And then it's very difficult to grasp experiences of individuals. What are living experiences of each particular individual, because this determines also how they perceive cultural heritage as such. And then what are then problems when we speak about intangible cultural heritage context? The first one is to determine limits in time, from where to where content should describe the particular object. I don't know, something what was brought into life in previous century should be nested in a certain time period. And to determine this period is rather difficult. The same is valid for geographic space, because not only intangible but also tangible cultural heritage depends on culture. And in this way, it is tied to geographic space. Chinese are in different positions as we are in Europe or in America or so. And then what is also very important is that context in this case is a multisensory expression. It means it's not only eyes that are informed about the cultural heritage. It's also our sound, our smell, maybe our taste, and to create context from this multisensory experience is very, very difficult. Then another type of problem is how to transfer context in time. It means how to transfer experience with context from one generation to next one. And it is not only about storytelling, that those who are older describe situation, how it was when they were young and so on. It's also about the state of the art in technology, about habits that were at the time and now are away and so on. Then how to transfer context between cultures or between societies, or even between communities. And the last problem is that there are different types of context. I declared it as an original context. It is the context that is natural to given object. Then there is mediated context, and in this case, I remind you of Baudrillard theory of simulacra, and it is visualized through this picture. This is not a pipe; it is a picture of pipe. In our case, it says that mediated context is not real context. It's a picture of context. It's not the real one. And nowadays, when we have digital technologies, we can also simulate context, and it can be completely different from different reasons. Maybe we want it to bring it more closer to younger generation. Maybe we put it in some kind of game and so on. What we can propose relating to the context. First proposal is to perceive context as a chain. It is started with a multisensory perception. Then this perception is transformed into information. Then there is some kind of cognitive process that give us understanding of information. Then each of us assess value to this understanding. And finally, we have something what we call context. When we look at it from another point of view, we can perceive context as an interactive story. It is not a static picture. It's something dynamic, and it is changing in time, in place, in culture, and so on. So from this then follows that the dynamic of context follow the dynamic of development the object itself. Intangible cultural heritage is also dynamic phenomena. It is not something static. So it's important to have a situation where both object and its context are developing in the same rate. And it also depends on development in a society or in general in culture. And if we try to put intangible cultural heritage context in the interrelationship with tangible cultural heritage, then I think that we can see it as the interface between these two types of cultural heritage. The context is some kind as a door between intangible and tangible cultural heritage. Some conclusions. Intangible cultural heritage is a time variable concept, and then context should also be constructed as a time variable construct or something as a time variable context. The second one is what is the meaning or how important is context? If we have intangible cultural heritage object without its context, we are in a situation of users of online social networks, and we can give like and dislike. I see something or I hear something, and I have no idea about the context, so I can only say that I like it or dislike it, not more. If we know the context, I can say I understand this object of cultural heritage, and I give him some value. It's very valuable for me, or it's less valuable for me, or something similar. So the conclusion is that context helps us to move from I like through I understand. The next step, and the next step, I develop intangible cultural heritage object further. I work in a creative manner on this object. So that's all from my side. Here is just literature. And I think my message is that it is very important to speak about definition of intangible cultural heritage. But at the same time, it's very important to look at the definition of its context, how to define context of intangible cultural heritage. These are something like twins. We need to know both of them to have clear picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Milan, to his contribution. And at this time, I would like to suggest that if you have any questions or comments, please keep them in mind for now, and we will have the opportunity to ask or discuss them after all four speakers have finished their presentations. Thank you. Now let me welcome and introduce our distinguished guest, Ambassador Anna Placid Mourinhová, permanent delegate of the Slovak Republic to UNESCO, and at the same time thank for her time and willingness to participate in our webinar. We really appreciate it. I will mention a few points from her CV. She's a graduate of our university, the Comenius University in Bratislava, and she's a doctor of law. She has had a successful career in Slovak diplomacy. Among her many positions, I would like to mention just that she was a director of the Development Cooperation Department at the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs of the Slovak Republic, and that she was the chair of the Enlargement of Countries Negotiating Accession to the EU Working Party. Thank you once again for joining us, and I would leave you to speak.
Thank you very much, Eva. I hope that you can hear me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to really thank you for the invitation to this webinar. I feel now like I'm stepping in the middle of a very, very sophisticated discussion, I would say. I mean, like my intervention will be much simpler. I would just like to focus on the position of Slovakia with respect to the ICH and UNESCO. But first of all, what I would like to say is that I consider your webinar very topical. With respect to the UNESCO activities in the area of cultural heritage. You know that next to the cultural and natural heritage protected by the Convention 1972, the ICH represents a really quickly evolving framework which needs to be better adapted to the current needs and technological possibilities and global trends. You know that its operational part, structured on the model of 1972 convention, appears to be inadequate to ensure appropriate safeguarding of the specificities of intangible heritage. And therefore, as you may know, UNESCO launched a reflection process in order to reform the current listing system of the 2003 convention. Therefore, as I say, the outcome of today's webinar may directly feed into this reflection process and provide really precious input for forthcoming meeting of the dedicated open-ended intergovernmental working group, which was established here in UNESCO and which will take place later this week. I think it's on Thursday and on Friday. So if you allow me, I will say a few words on the position of Slovakia with respect to ICH and UNESCO. And I'm very glad to say that the sustainable development of the ICH is about priorities of the Slovak government, and I can definitely feel it. I have quite a work to do here in this domain, which is of course very good, and I'm very happy. Everything started, or not really started, but with respect to UNESCO in 2006 when we ratified the convention, and this launched the process of institutional as well as conceptual building of the whole framework of the safeguarding the intangible cultural heritage, with the advisory body of the minister established and also important policy documents approved by the government. Then later on, with the adoption of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, it became clear that the living heritage plays a very important role also in the implementation of several sustainable development goals. So in Slovakia, we therefore focus on building a strong expertise in safeguarding the living heritage as a vital source of a sustainable way of living and the preservation of cultural diversity. We continue also developing our competence in the field of digital monitoring, as well as providing large access to information about living traditions to disadvantaged and marginalized groups, including children and youth. And this I personally consider very, very important, that the education from the very young age related to ICH is there. And I'm also very happy to note that UNESCO, together with the European Union, have launched a project to strengthen this connection between young people, cultural heritage, and education. It's called Teaching and Learning with Living Heritage. And first results of this project will be presented also during a webinar, another webinar organized by Slovakia and the Czech Republic, this time later this month. So this strong expertise that we're trying to build has been also recognized in UNESCO and its structures. I'm very glad to say that a Slovak expert, Lubica Volanska, is a member of the evaluation body of the Intergovernmental Committee for Intangible Cultural Heritage and has been also recently elected its chairwoman. So based on these two strengths, the experience that we have and the expertise that we have, Slovakia has presented its candidature to the Intergovernmental Committee for Intangible Cultural Heritage for the period 2022 and 26. So cross fingers that we are elected. And from this perspective, we follow also the current process of reform of the listing system of the convention very, very closely. So to finish, I would therefore really like to wish you very fruitful discussion, and I really hope that you will be able to come with really concrete and valuable recommendations which can support this process which is ongoing here in UNESCO. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And now it's time for Anna.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ana Carvalho. I'm a researcher here at UNESCO Chair for Intangible Heritage at the University of Évora. And welcome, everyone, again. And I have the privilege to present the next speakers. And we will continue with a talk by Professor Filipe Temudo Barata. As many of you know, Filipe is the founder of the UNESCO Chair here in Intangible Heritage at our university. He is a full professor, retired, but very much active with several projects dealing with tangible and intangible heritage. And today, Filipe will talk about communities, traditional know-how, and safeguarding. So, Filipe, please welcome, and the screen is yours. Please, the sound. You have to activate your sound.
Yeah. So hello to everybody. I forgot this kind of thing. Okay, so I must say one thing. During this year and a half or something like that, at least I have time to do two things: keep on going, working, and to think. Really, during this 18 months, I think a lot. And by the way, I wrote a lot. I just wrote a book about this kind of my thoughts, if you want. And I'd like very much just to try to explain my starting points. The next one, please. And then because a little bit in the opposite of Professor Convit, I try to reorganize my theoretical approach with my practical work, because I keep on going helping communities, a lot of them. I keep on going thinking, I keep on going participating in meetings, I keep on going consulting, assessing governments about ICH and things like this. And even I had some official positions where I should assess and give my opinion to governments and in the middle of institutions. So I don't want to break my practical side with the capability perhaps I have about thinking the problems. And so the next image, it's about the two articles that bother me all the time in my practical work. It is the article 12, it is about inventories that each state compromised to produce, and 15, where the classification of the intangible heritage never can forget the communities, the groups, and the persons that deals and are the producers of ICH. Okay, this is my barriers, and what I feel is the creation of a kind of a tension, if you want, between those who are responsible for the inventories, mean central offices, and the communities. This is what I'm going to speak about. So the next one, please. For this thing, it is so the national inventories and the insurance that the participation of commissions is where I feel I have strong feelings about this tension. The next one, please. So I'm trying to present you one story and three situations. Here it is my actors. The first one are a family. This family is shoemakers, traditional shoemakers in Cuba, Alentejo. In the south of Portugal, this man is the head, it is the shoemaker itself, but with the help of his family. He's still working there. They have his office there. They're still producing shoes in traditional way. Okay, this is my first situation. The second one, it is something. The next one, please. Sonia, the next one, please. Sonia disappeared. Okay, the next one is something that I am very committed with. It is the Foundation Orient Occident. It is a Morocco foundation where I'm working since the last, I don't know, 25 years, something like that. And what we are doing there, in the middle of a lot of other things, we are the only organization in Morocco that receive, protect, and support migrants of all kinds. These 10 women, we organize a cooperative of them to produce textile clothes. And this woman here in your right side is called Solange. She's from the Republic of Congo, and she take 4 years to come from the Republic of Congo to Morocco. And it is the way she tells this story, how she has done this. She said, I walk, and I walk. And she's this beautiful woman is now one of these 10. She's here in yellow, and she's one of the producers of this and the most important figures of this cooperative. It is already in Italy, also an office. The important thing is, I must say, I'm administrator pro bono of this foundation since the last years. And this is the second situation. The next one is, please, something that exists everywhere. In this case, I think this is Brazil. I take this in Brazil. This is a group of people, of women in this case. They are learning to produce ceramics. This kind of thing exists everywhere. It doesn't matter if this is just an example of formal learning of, in this case, ceramic. Okay. The next situation is also, and this one it is in Brazil. This is very interesting because it is in Fortaleza, Ceará. It is in the northeast of Brazil, where the authorities have what they call the Book of Masters, where they can inscribe those they consider the master. There is a procedure. I have no time to explain it, but this is important just to understand what I'm talking about. This is an official, if you want, poster about the masters of Fortaleza, is the capital of Ceará, northeast of Brazil. Okay, this is my 4 actors. Okay, the next one, please. Look, we are talking about formation in different conditions. This will, in your left side are workshop training, because the son learn with the father, and the interesting part is there is each time we seeing disappear this kind of formation, because in the city we have this, we see disappear this kind of formation from generation to generation. And what it is much more common nowadays is this formal training everywhere. My question is, this is clearly in the first case in this workshop training, this is a community of people that do shoes. But in this kind of formation in your right side, this is a group, this is a community, because most of these people some of them can practice some ceramic work, but in the end of the day, most of them, they don't depend on this, they don't keep on working on this, and this is the interesting part. The next one, please. And in fact, this situation, these four situations I present to you, they have different types of supports. In the first case, in Brazil, Book of Masters, they have the official support. And by the way, those who are on the book receive a small amount of money every month to go to schools explaining what they are doing. In our foundation, we receive no public support. We receive from the refugees, United Nations Refugees Organization. Yeah, we receive because we don't. We have very good accountabilities, and we show where we spend the money and so on. But we have not. We must imagine what to do with these people, because, by the way, we are supporting in this moment 5,000 people. 5,000 people now in this moment. Next one, please. Okay, and the interesting part is the classification. Okay, so in this your left side, all these masters that are in the Book of Office, they have their activities classified in, no matter if in the city books, no matter if in the state level or in the national level. But this shoemaker, he has nothing. In fact, he has any kind of classification, any kind of protection, and he just survived. I really don't know how he's surviving, because he's all the time poor, by the way. So, next one, please. My question is, sorry. It is job alternatives. Of case of, no, the next one, please. Yeah. Most of these people that are learning ceramics here, they are, in this case, ceramics, but they are not interested in exactly the job, to have a new skill. They are much more interested in see how the time passed by. But the people that work in this foundation and all the situations, they only have this skill they learn here. They don't know how to do nothing more except this. Do the very different situations. Next one, please. And this is why I think public policies became the central knot of the protection of ICH and the safeguarding of ICH. They are the only one that are able to link national inventories with the protection and safeguarding with traditional know-how of communities. This is why I think to think about what kind of public policies we must think about. I think it is the knot of this new situation for the safeguarding in the future of ICH. Please, the next one. And of course, we have published a book, Jesse and me, we have published, and Francesco Molinari and Sonia Cabeza. We have the four of us, we are the editors of a book about explaining how public policies with the using of tools such as living labs can deal with this new situation, because they are because they are really the central of and they are able to promote this discussion and dialogue between public powers and the population in general. Next one, please. Of course, a living lab, just for those who doesn't know very well what I'm talking about, is a flexible structure, can be association, center, public or private institution, gathering stakeholders to implement. They are interested in implementing policies. They taking in consideration conservation, recovery, and valorization. You can read it here. Just let me tell you something. In the experience I have done in Évora a couple of years ago, when we edited this book, it is very interesting. The people that are working in the recovery of buildings, they didn't knew what the research center were doing. They didn't knew the people that work in the city hall. They didn't knew the architects of the city hall. Nobody knew each other. It was very interesting. And this kind of heritage living lab, its function exactly try to gather this gap and fulfill this gap. The next one, please. And so what kind of things these living labs can discuss and can negotiate, because this negotiation is important. And you have a lot of things to discussion in the middle of this and negotiate. Because negotiate, it is a very complex situation. Negotiate with the population, negotiate those who run the city, negotiate with those who think the city. And this is very hard task. And in fact, in our societies, there is no room for this kind of institutions. This is why it is important to do so. And my first, if you want, proposal is the last one, please. There was another one, please. Sorry, there was another one. No, perhaps I eat the last one. Let me just add two things. In fact, from the theoretical point of view, it is I like very much. I must say I like very much the thoughts that Professor Convit, because it is interesting, because he has, as far as I can see, he have time to think about the same problems. He think about the theoretical framework. I have preferred to think about my practical view and my practical intervention. It is very very interesting. But in the next phase, perhaps you can discuss something about the thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Philippe, for bringing us so many different situations, so many practices beyond the ICH on the lists, and also the role of public policies that I hope we can debate later on, because it's quite a hot topic now that we are thinking about how to recover from the pandemic that for intangible heritage has brought many losses, many limitations, and the context that Professor Milan talked about, many of the contexts disappear, at least for a short time, I hope. So we'll continue now with Jessie March, our last talk of the day. Jessie March is a very dear colleague. We worked together 14 years ago. Is based in Palermo, Italy, and we worked in a project. It was called Project Mediated. It was actually one of the first projects, cooperation projects, doing research about intangible heritage in the view of the 2003 Convention. Regarding Jessie, just let me say he's a very active and proactive person. He has been working with technology innovation in many cooperation European projects, including interconnecting with intangible heritage. And it's precisely about these experiences, these European projects, that he's going to talk with us with this talk. So welcome, Jessie, and the screen is yours, please.
Oh. Okay, thank you very much. Again, thank you for the invitation to this webinar, and thank you, Anna, for that kind introduction. Yes, I'm going to pick up a little bit. I see the logic of my participation here, because I'm going to pick up and connect pretty strongly, I think, to both what Professor Convit and Filippa Barata were saying. talking about this idea of community innovation labs. Okay, and I mainly want to discuss two experiences. The first is this Medins project that Anna mentioned. And what I have listed here, and the second is a more recent project that we'll look at in the field of textiles and clothing. What I have listed here, which has always fascinated me, are what the UNESCO Convention defines as the four main attributes of intangible cultural heritage. That it is traditional, contemporary, and living at the same time, that it is inclusive, representative, and community-based. And I have been always fascinated by this idea, by many of the ideas that Professor Convet mentioned, in the sense that the community is very much the context, not exclusively the context, but it's both the context and the container in a certain sense of ICH. No, sorry, it's both the container and the contained. It is both what defines the context of the thing, whatever the intangible heritage is, and it's also in many cases the intangible heritage itself. So it's the kind of thing that I think is very fascinating also for people that have fun with the new technologies, because it's very interesting to try and define all this. Now, the first example I wanted to give you was what we did in Bagheria, which is a town near Palermo, in this Medins project. And already way back then, we had the idea of experimenting with sort of a technology-based living lab and trying to do that very much at the community dimension, explore the community dimension. Time travels very quickly, so it's kind of hard to remember what technologies look like even 15 years ago, but I think you'll get a taste from the shots, because I managed to dig up PowerPoints from that time. The first thing we did was to try and get together a group of people interested in the topic in the community, and we opened a blog where we tried to capture some stories and allow anyone in the community to join this multimedia laboratory and be part of it. We found some people who were playing with some of the first examples of virtual reality. This was from the University of Pisa, and what you see represented here is a piece on a typical Sicilian cart, the wood carving, which is done in the town of Bagheria. So we were trying to see how not so much use the technology as use the technology to provoke the community members for thinking outside of the box, for thinking how things could be done differently and how they could think about themselves differently. Perhaps the most interesting thing was a website, I think it's still around, this service, but it's almost irrelevant, called Community Walk. And here, again, we worked with various people in the community and helped them put themselves on the map, literally. And here you see listed artisan workshops, pastry stores, restaurants, various people who in some way are part of the community holding intangible cultural heritages and saying to themselves, why don't you open, put yourself on the map. The categories you can see in the menu there: rural life, artisans, pastries, gastronomy, arts and media, public authorities, performers, and parks and museums. So there's a mix of context and people, but we were just following what people thought would be relevant to put on the map. The idea of representing the community and its intangible cultural heritage this way, in a participatory way. And then we encourage people to take pictures and put them on Flickr. And I think that those are Anna's pictures at the beginning of that, because she came first alphabetically. And Flickr was a relatively recent phenomenon. And we were encouraging people from all across the partnership to take pictures of their local things and to just put them up and to publish them for all to see and share. The same thing with videos, and these are videos, I believe, from the University of Granada, but we did ours as well, video interviews with people showing the art and trying to capture what was going on. And perhaps most fun, we did a series of evenings in this historical villa in the city of Bagaria, where we just invited the citizens to show up and I don't know, sing the lullaby that their mothers sang them, or bring a picture of their family, or bring a piece of sewing or embroidery that they knew how to do, and all that kind of stuff. And we were there with video cameras, recording equipment, and so on and so forth. And we tried to capture, in a sort of festive moment, we tried to capture these moments and these elements of intangible cultural heritage and classify them and put them up on the web in some way. Then what we tried to do was to, below you see the different services. Audio was at the time a sort of a YouTube for audio tracks. The different services that we used, well, where people were putting up, you could say, fragments or evidence, like of their heritage, and then we developed a sort of front end where we could classify all of this and try and make sense out of it, and also try and characterize the elements and their context, and be able to, the idea being you could navigate across Europe and across the places that were represented by the partnership to see, like, say, if you had Easter, a pastry in Bagaria that was about Easter, you could go to Évora and see what Easter celebrations looked like there, or the origins of the same pastry, and travel around through the intangible cultural heritage. This is sort of what the front end looks like. And I swear, this is the old slide, and it has University of Évora on there. And in fact, the most recent, the visited sites, this is a prototype. It never got much further than this. Anna seems to remember it. This was the back end where we gave the different ways we could define the elements, that we could define the individual things of intangible cultural heritage. And it was through these elements that we could travel from one place to another. And this is the old XML, how would you say, this was a comparative table of the categories used in different contexts. You see in column A, UNESCO domains. You see in column F, a Murcia mapping. And the idea is that this could allow you to situate something and relate it to different classification systems used by different regional databases. So we were able to interconnect the elements of the different regional databases as a back end to the system. The idea being that we could, that this could somehow be a trans-Mediterranean, it was the Med program kind of thing. The second experience I wanted to talk about is much more recent. It's just ended 2 years ago, which in COVID times means yesterday. And this was a project not about ICH, it was about textiles and clothing and new business models and so on and so forth. But when you think about it, textiles and clothing has a very, very strong element of intangible cultural heritage. If you navigate the UNESCO constellation and take a look at the UNESCO listed items of ICH, they all have clothes on. Almost half of them have a very strong characterizing dimension. It may be a dance, it may be some ritual of the clothing that the people have. So textile and clothing is, we could say, a sort of a staple. Now, this connects to what Filipa was saying, because the blue dots you see here, this is the network we built. And there were innovation labs of different types. There were, of course, the more technical ones looking at new types of materials or finishing processes, but there were a lot of social innovation labs that worked very much with the intangible cultural dimension. The yellow blobs there are the different businesses and industries. And what we tried to do was to connect among other things, the dimension of ICH with the businesses who could see value in that. Here you see, like in the Medins project, we were playing with advanced technologies. The woman you see at the center of this photo has on augmented reality glasses, and we did concrete experiments of trying to capture people physically weaving using ancient looms, or weaving according to local practices, to capture their movements and to capture the movement of the loom as a way, on the one hand, of recording that element of ICH, but also as the possibility of transmitting it, of teaching someone else. Because if you're surrounded by a virtual representation of the loom and the hands are moving, showing you what to do, and so on and so forth. So that was our biggest high-tech experimentation. But we were also very concerned, and the textile and clothing industry is very concerned about the fact that with globalization and sending all of the manufacture of clothing to Bangladesh, nobody in Europe knows how to sew anymore. So there is knowledge, which is a very important part of the cultural knowledge. In fact, in most of the countries in Eastern Europe are the only places where it survives. There is sort of a hidden territorial knowledge that quite simply has to do with sewing, knitting, embroidering, and so on. And here you see one of our TCBL labs. And what they did is every Thursday, they just invited people to come and knit together. And people came out from the most unexpected places all over the place. Nobody knew who these people were or that they knew how to knit, but they were the ones who maintained, kept alive the knowledge in that territory about how to make clothes. And they came together because the community dimension, the possibility to socialize, to talk, to chat while doing this activity was what attracted them to come. And you see there are also girls and young women and young men, the men less so, but they also were happy to transmit their knowledge and to teach the young girls and the students. So here was a question of not maintaining, but recovering, we could say, the knowledge that's in Sicily. The tailoring tradition is extremely important, of recovering that knowledge and bringing it back out into the open in a community dimension, in a social way. Here's another TCBL lab that's like this dimension. This is in Athens, and it's called the Social Sewing Factory. This woman, the blonde woman kneeling, she literally takes sewing machines into the migrant camps that are surrounding Athens. And so that the people who are coming from all sorts of different cultures and countries can have a physical activity that they can be useful to the world with, which they had from their country, but also to learn from them about the different traditions and skills about making clothes. So this is an interesting example of a renewed community dimension from the influx and the mix of different cultures and the different cultures of sewing coming together. And finally, this is the last one. This is another social sewing laboratory. They mostly work with children with difficulties, socially at risk, and ex-prisoners. And they again are learning the art of sewing, but they're taking it literally into the community. And here they put the things on this little three-wheeled truck and carry some of the work they did, but also the sewing machines, and set up camp in the middle of the poor and peripheral neighborhoods of Palermo. So that again is taking the knowledge and the art of sewing into the community. Now, very quickly, just those, I tried to show you how the community dimension is important, how much it's a part of ICH, and how it's not so difficult to keep it alive if you want to focus on that dimension and think about ways you can do some things. Now, I want to show you just quickly 2 examples of things we're doing right now. This is, that are more related to the policy dimension. This is a diagram from a project that we're doing, a very high-tech project on bio-based fibers and textiles and materials and so on and so forth. And we just ran into this laboratory at a university outside of Naples, and who have been working with bio-based textiles and so on. And together with another project, which we'll see in the next slide, they began to work with a local LAG, a leader local action group, which means a rural community. The pink blobs you see here are rural towns, which are either totally deserted or have between 500 and 1,500 inhabitants, so they're very small. And what you see here is the recreation of a fully circular economy. The green blobs are where they are planting crops, and you can see evidence, some crops which are used for food according to the local conditions. The other project is about the Mediterranean diet, so that's one of their main focus areas. But they've also characterized the crops by those that can be turned into fibers, because many crops can be somehow processed and you can spin them, and crops that can be used to produce natural dyes. So the only step that they're missing is the processing between the fibers and between the crops themselves, the feedstock and the fibers. But with the project, we're helping them cover that. But from there, they do the spinning here, recovering the local tradition. They do the weaving here in these villages, and that's what the legend is all about, recovering the local tradition. They do the dyeing. The dyeing actually takes place in an ex-monastery where the sisters, where they're using the 15th century tubs carved out of stone to dye the textiles, and they do the sewing and they produce the clothes. So it's an entirely, and the same clothes, of course, they can recycle. So it's an entirely circular economy, bringing back to the fore all of the local knowledge about how to make textiles and clothing. And there's also a promotional and touristic dimension. And the interesting thing of this is that it could be an interesting idea to connect the theme of community-based ICH to rural development policy. The LEADER program and the rural innovation policy is a significant part of the European Commission's budget, at least. And it's very much about, organic food and about rural tourism and so on and so forth. But the idea of introducing ICH as one of the goals of rural policy is something that we're looking at there, and we're trying to see how that could be introduced into the regional planning for the LEADER program and its various sons and daughters. And this is something, it can be very schematic, but this is actually within the Embeddedness project on the Med diet. And what we're trying to do here is to identify a canvas. This tries to give, it's interesting in relation to what Professor Convet was saying, a description of, this is a canvas in the sense that these are some of the main things you would need to describe in a community. Let's say a community wants to become an ICH living lab. Let's say a community wants to be empowered to be able to certify, for instance, that the clothing made or the food made in that community by the people of that community are honest to goodness ICH, somehow giving it a label of quality and authenticity. What would that community have to look like? Not so much the ICH itself. So who is going to animate the community? So there's a first column about the context, ICH context. And in fact, that gives an idea, but that's also dynamic concept texts, such as the policy instruments that are available to draw on the challenges, the development challenges the community faces, and so on. In the middle are the activities and services that the Living Lab plans to or is carrying out. And these are the activities and services to promote learning, to promote community animation, and so on and so forth. And to the right are the strategies that, together with the local stakeholders, they decided to find. Now, since in this Med-Diet project, what they're trying to do is to build a network using a sort of peer guarantee system, to build a network of centers, living labs, that can be recognized as being communities that actively promote ICH and can also authenticate a function that the UNESCO listing does, but at the community level. We're testing to see how the use of a canvas like this can be a way of qualifying a community, of the peer communities, looking at what it looks like, how they fill this out, and say, yes, you can be one of us. So between all of these experiences, just to highlight what are some of the common approaches. The first is that innovation, I think, is required to keep ICH alive, but it needs to be a pure mix where it becomes difficult to distinguish between technical innovation, technology innovation, social innovation, and institutional innovation, which is an important part. The role of the public sector needs to be part of the innovation process. The second point is actively reaching out to local communities and searching out for hidden cultural knowledge. The ICH is often hidden from view because very much modern society doesn't celebrate it, doesn't allow it to come out. So it's hidden in families, it's hidden in rural communities, and you have to find ways to make it come alive again. And the community dimension is very much a way to do that. Connecting cultures here and now, that's the sort of translocal model, that a local network is strengthened by its being interconnected to other networks, but the local and the interconnected dimensions play towards each other. And finally, communities co-creating their own databases, communities getting themselves online, giving communities the tools and the instruments to make themselves visible and to tell their own story, not to have somebody else from the outside come in and tell them who they are and what wonderful things they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, for this presentation. We now have some time to debate. You can use the chat and you can raise your hand with this function in Zoom. So please, we can start debating. Meanwhile, if people are still thinking about what to ask or comment, maybe I could just try to, I don't resist to ask Jesse about these new technologies, because we started 14 years ago experimenting with technologies. How could we give more visibility to our databases, to that information that was a bit locked, and how could we just interconnect files and bring it more to the surface? Actually, the digital, it's all we talk about now, how we operate now. The last report about the impact of COVID in living heritage, the report from UNESCO this year, just one of the recommendations reinforces the role of new technologies to really enhance and give more visibility. I would like to ask you, Jesse, 14 years ago and now, what is different? Are the discussions different? I think they're similar and somehow, I don't know if you agree, but what is different now? Are we discussing different things? We are continuing talking about transmission, the loss of or disappearance of many cultural practices, and the role technology could have. Are we, in your opinion, talking about different things about 14 years later, or is it still very topical? And what's your view?
Well, 14 years ago, technology was generally considered a good thing. Innovation was generally considered a good thing. We've, of course, learned to have second thoughts about that, second, third, and fourth thoughts about that. And not so much technology, but the ability to leverage technology in order to sort of commoditize and take advantage of ICH. I'd like to give you an example of that. You could have a project of, you know, representing Sicilian embroidery, okay, and conserving it. You catalog it, you do awareness, everybody likes it, and it's very nice. And then along comes a well-known fashion designer, and I won't mention their names, and they will use that embroidery on their fashion, right? And they will sell you a pair of jeans for 5,000 euro because it's embroidered by somebody there. But the technology has been used to make that embroidery fashion. They're using fashion bloggers to spread it out and so on and so forth. But they are enslaving the people who are actually making their jeans. So we've taken energy away from the community. We've exploited the community. We have to be very careful about how easy it is to use technology to exploit people. And ICH is very fragile in that sense. That's why I believe very much in the community dimension, because we need to defend we need to defend these people against the exploitation. And I think that's the biggest risk. The risk is, there is the risk, and I think UNESCO is very concerned about the risk that all of this will disappear. And in fact, you know, the industry is also worried about all of this disappear because you find out you need these people and so on and so forth. But the problem is the exploitation, I think, and the fragility of the people that know how to do these things. And the exploitation means a sort of Netflixization of cultural heritage.
Yeah. May I say something, Anna?
Yes.
Yeah, I know the name of the guy that just to talk about now. Yeah, I know the name. Yeah. Okay. Now I'd like very much to talk about the theoretical approach that Milinkovic has done about the issue. Look, my problem is the concept of context. Because in the end of the day, context is a so wider concept that absorb everything. I give you an example, perhaps, about this. In fact, ICH, as all heritage, is a social construction. I mean, the people decided this represents something for him, and so they want to keep it because it is a milestone of his narrative. With ICH, it's happened. But if I'm not able to separate the social dimension of the problem, the political dimension of the problem, using just the word context, don't you think is too wider and too vague, the word context? Here it is my approach, because in fact, in history, what we can assist is ICH change. And by the way, I have done a cartoon of history of Sicily, where from 600 before Christ until now, the self-identification of a person changed a lot with the rich history of Sicily. Because why? Because it was a social construction in one hand, a religion dimension in the other hand. Okay, I think of it, call this all this the context. don't you think it is a too vague concept? Here it is my question. Because I was very interested about it. Because when I deal with the reality, is important for me to understand what I'm talking about. We are talking about. Thank you.
Professor Milan, would you like to maybe reply to this provocation? You should.
It is much more a doubt than a provocation.
Yeah,
huh?
Of course I can. And do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, fine. So I agree with Telmo that it's very broad and very, I say, foggy concept. We don't know from where to where we are supposed to think about context. And it is not only problem of limits or borders. It's also problem of some kind of measurement. So, what has higher influence, and on the contrary, what is just of minor influence. But still, I think we have to speak about context, because otherwise we are in a vacuum.
Of course.
And my idea is that it is necessary to work more on the concept of context. And maybe next time we can elaborate on this.
Thank you. I hope next time, because I'm interested in discuss this concept. Yeah, because I'm sorry. Can I reply?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Look, here it is, because my starting point here is a little bit it's different, in fact, because look, what I understand is our societies in general were, since the last 80 years, were much more homogeneous. Okay,
yeah.
Because it was much more homogeneous, shall I say, the context was much more, people agree about what is their ICH, agree what is intangible heritage, because the society was homogeneous. Now, when the society has, and the cities grow everywhere, became a big metropole with communities everywhere. Of course, it is much more difficult to find out something that is common to the people in the city. So it is fair to say that. It is much more complicated. So in this sense, we can say the context. The problem is this concept is enough to describe the struggle, the real struggle between all these communities that are living in the new city, and the referee that the central office should do. Here it is I want to express this doubt, but I'm agree with you. I wait to the next discussion to discussion this concept of context. Thank you.
Welcome.
Jesse, you wanted to talk?
Yeah, I wanted to have a word in the favor of Professor Convict, because I think that well, there are people who think in a very clean and clear way, and I'm not one of them, but you need that sometimes, because it's not so much the word context, but the understanding of the implications of that word that the professor gave us, which I think are essential from the standpoint of someone who's more of a practitioner like me. You could say that you realize context when it's missing. What you were describing about the urban environment, or even what I was describing about certain fashion designers or about technology, is the fact that the context, things are disembodied from their context. It makes me think of another very conceptual word, which is embeddedness from Karl Polanyi, which is where if it's almost as if ICH is not embedded in a context. The context can change, but there is this dialogue between foreground and background, between ICH and context, and so on and so forth, that if you lose that dialogue, it dies, it's dead. So that doesn't give you any policy recipes, but it helps us understand. I mean, you know, we do experiments, we work with people, we work with situations, and we try to learn from what's going on. And I think that concepts like that are very useful to help us understand what happened. But I think that again, the importance of context, you see it when it's not there.
Sure, I agree with you.
I don't want to keep
but Felipe is provoking us both.
Okay.
No, I'm not provoking you, because in fact contexts are changing every hour. And look, what I'm trying, and it is interesting, and by the way, it is interesting when we think, look, I have some experience in trying to classify things in terms of UNESCO, in terms of national context, by the way. And it is interesting because, why it is interesting? Because there is, look, the central office, the central state, the central administration, look at the problem, this is an obligation of the state. I don't want to share it with nobody, right? This is the context where the state intervened, right? So, I mean, the central offices of every country, all the municipalities, the national level, regional level, no matter. They decided, they have the expert to decide what is to be classified, what should be classified, what shouldn't. The communities should, according to the UNESCO Convention, should be in. Their context is also always a fragile context. As far as I know, and I really know a lot of places around the world, as far as I know, when the state decided to have something classified, the interesting part is they don't care about the communities. What's happened here? This is why, for instance, and I can give you a lot of examples, there in the practices that doesn't exist anymore, they are nowadays in the UNESCO list. They are in the UNESCO list, but the community really doesn't exist. It is a decision of the state. Okay, we can say this is the context of the authorities, but the problem is the context also of the communities, the group of the individuals. And for instance, now I'm trying to classify a very small village in Portugal that do broderie. You cannot imagine, because their context has nothing to do with the decision of the state that has another context. My problem with the context is sometimes is the context is so vague in the practical side that this is why I think what the Confit said, that is Milan Confit said, it is necessary to discuss this context, this concept of context. But let me say, I think it's very interesting to discuss starting from the concept itself, but just to make it more precise. It is my point. Okay.
Mm-hmm. More comments, more questions. I don't see other questions. Please raise your hand if you want to comment or ask any question. If there are no questions, I could ask Professor Philippe. You were talking about these different situations where traditional bearers or artisans when you think about public policies and thinking about this period of recovery that we will have to move on to, and thinking about the impact that the pandemic has made in intangible heritage, and many people that lost their earning, what would you recommend in terms of public policies or regional policies, or in your considering, for instance, our national context? Is there anything it should be prioritized at this moment? Thinking and artisans know-how that a lot of people lost their job in that context. Is there something the government should do in a priority way, in your view and your practical experience of dealing with people and having their feedback in this kind of phase we are now living on?
Look, I'm not sure I'm aware what is happening during the pandemic with these people. I really don't know very well. What I'm saying is, I keep on doing with the communities I work with. I keep on working, but really I don't know what is happening. I have no data about what's happened during this 1.5 years. One thing I know the impact on me, on myself. This I know, because for the first time in my life, I had time to think. This I know very well. And the second thing, I think it is interesting when we look at the world. It is very interesting to look at the legislation around the world. It is very, very interesting. For instance, Portugal has a law about intangible heritage since 2009, right? They have some changes and so on, but the law, it is about a very Napoleonic thing. We decided as Napoleon, we have the law. Okay, but the United States that doesn't have a law about intangible heritage. In fact, they have a law for Indian communities, for I don't know what, local communities, and all over they have different laws for different realities. In France, in fact, they don't have a law. What they have in France is a kind of articles that allow them to classify. In Italy, for instance, the national law, it is still to be approved, as far as I know. But in Korea, they have faculties of intangible heritage. So what I want to say is, all over the world, the situation is very, very different. Perhaps I can have some numbers and some figures that is very striking. I give you a couple of them. For instance, if we consider that literature is the expression of a community, or poetry is an expression of a community, and this expression is translated in what the UNESCO, wrong way, but it is what the UNESCO consider the vehicle of the intangible heritage. Okay, here it is a result. There is nowadays more or less 7,000 languages, dialects, and special way to speak. Till the end of this century, it is supposed that will disappear 3,500. It means all this literature, all these languages, all this poetry linked to this way of seeing the world, they will disappear. Mm-hmm. And why? Because it is very difficult to resist to this mainstream pressure. And I can give you examples everywhere, because we are losing our memory. Let me just to tell you, if you allow me just to tell you this small story about the memory. Usually I give a lot of conferences a little bit everywhere. One of these days I was in Cape Verde, in the island of Cape Verde. In Cape Verde Island, there is what we call the father of independence. The father of independence were the men that was a director of a small journal that think about the reasons and the fairness to be Cape Verde independent. Okay, in the big hall in the university, there was about 200 people of the university. I present the head of this man, and I asked to these 200 people, who is he? Can you imagine? Nobody recognized him. Nobody recognized him. And what's happened with the faces of the person? It happened to me everywhere. People lose very easily the memory with the mainstream transmitted by TV, by music, and so on and so on. So we have a problem of safeguarding, really. And this is why public policies are the only tool able to to help us to resist this situation, because step by step, most of the ICH will disappear. I'm sure of it, and I can give you examples about. I know that this knowledge that Jesse speak about, this knowledge a little bit spread and hidden even in the communities, not that they don't have even conscience that they have, but they are running. They are this also this. From generation to generation, they became as the biodiversity poorer, and with the time they will disappear. This is why I think public policies are a key, the important key for the safeguarding.
Thank you. Eva, if you have any questions to bring to the table, please do. Meanwhile, I don't see any more comments or questions. I don't know if Professor Antonia Conde is still with us. Maybe she wants to say something. Or Marcella, please, or Sonia, could you?
Of course, I'm here, Anna. Thank you. I'm very glad to be sharing with you these moments, because it's always learning with people that is used to work in these teams. I heard very attentively all the communications, of course, and I think indeed the work of our chair here in the University of Évora, also as the project BDIAS, are doing things well done. I think we are in the right way. And especially because we can see here different generations. We are learning indeed. People like Philippe, like Milo, they can indeed share with us experiences, reflections that can help us and help the equips to do and to think how to do, because in the field and to join the work in the field with theoretical thoughts, it's always the good thing to do. And I must say that as historian of the modern period, because there is some distance in the level of the questions we pose with the research, but there are points that in the level of the material culture of intangible heritage that we can think in a very constructive way. So for me, it was very pleasant to be really to be here and to know better the equip in Slovakia and all the participants, of course, and to see also Professor Jesse, because I have been also in Medin's project, not so much as Anna, but I remember with Professor Filipe, especially, to see Musei de Pioreforme in Pisa. And it was really a very special experience. And for me, it was very glad to hear you talk about that, how the informatics and the digital humanities can also be joined to the ICH, excuse me. So these are my words. I cannot take you longer, no more time. And once again, it was really good to be here. And I wish this equip can get more dialogues like this one, because this is the right way to do the things. Thank you.
I don't know if Sonia wanted to say also.
Well, I want to thank you also to all, but I was a question that was in my mind before. It's a little in line with the previous themes. So we are talking about communities and contexts and maybe also some different geographies. And I was a question in my mind that is, what can we learn or reflect from the experience of intangible cultural heritage that was classified in cooperation by different countries and different communities, like the Mediterranean diet or the falconry. So I don't know if Professor Filipe or some can say something about this. It's a good experience, it's not, so because it's different communities, and it's a topic interesting.
No, Jesse, perhaps you want, if you want to talk about the Mediterranean diet, it was a good idea, right?
Yes, but the question of Sonia, I think, was slightly different. Is what we learned from the international collaboration. There, I think, well, which is what the Mediterranean Diet Project is a trans-Mediterranean project in that sense. But I think the main thing we learn from the collaboration is in order to understand, like Filipe was saying, these women don't know that they're holding a certain culture. You have to get outside of your culture and look at it with the eyes from the outside in order to, number one, understand the importance of the context, but also to understand the culture itself. And by the Mediterranean diet, to go back to your comment, Filipe, each of the regions that is involved in that project thinks that the way they eat is the Mediterranean diet. But now they are beginning to realize that the Mediterranean diet is much more complex, and it is the connection between these things, and they see which part of what they eat is specific to their territory and which part is in fact the Mediterranean diet, and it's all a play on the concepts of context. So that can only happen by I mean, that's the concept at the basis of anthropology. In order to understand a culture, you have to look at it both from the inside and the outside at the same time.
Yeah, may I say something about this, perhaps? Look, as far as I know, as far as I feel, perhaps, it's better to say like this. The first thing I learned, and I think everybody learned, is we have the same problems. And this is very important to be able to understand that we have common problems and perhaps it is important to try to protect it and to safeguard. In this case, the ICH is important because not only because the ICH itself, but also because there is a lot of people that doesn't know how to live different, because there is still a lot of people living about with the skills they have, and they feel a kind of they are not able to resist alone. And so the creation of some some links of solidarity. I think in my case, personally, I think it has been important all along these years. And it is interesting because all the experience I've been involved, with some exceptions, there is everywhere some exceptions, but it is these two things, these three things, if you want. The first one is we have the same problems. The second one is this solidarity between among a lot of people. And the third thing, everybody recognizes that it is the importance of public policies that should be different. And how the thing perhaps that we have not discovered yet is how to impose different to impose different public policies.
Thank you. I don't know if Eva or Professor Milan want to just add any comments. We are about to just wrap it up to close. We are almost ahead of time, but Eva, any last comments, or should we close it?
I think it's time to close our meeting. So it was very nice, and I would like to thank all speakers, all participants for the time and inspiring ideas. And it was very great meeting, and hope we will meet again, maybe sometimes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.